The stars had always been silent. For millions of years, humanity looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. They built telescopes. They sent signals into the void. They dreamed of the day when someone would answer. On the night of June 17th, 2087, someone finally did. Tae-ho Park stood in his small apartment in Seoul, holding a birthday cake with 5 candles. His daughter, Hana, sat at the table with her eyes closed, making a wish. His wife, Hana, stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. The evening was warm. The windows were open. Somewhere outside, a street vendor was selling fish cakes, and the smell drifted up to the 3rd floor. "Make a good wish," Hana whispered to their daughter. Little Hana opened her eyes and blew out the candles. The room filled with clapping and laughter. Tae-ho felt his heart swell with a simple, quiet joy. Tomorrow, he would return to his duties at the Korean Space Defense Force. But tonight, he was just a father. Just a husband. Just a man who loved his family. He did not know that in 6 hours, his wife would be dead. He did not know that by morning, half of Seoul would be burning. He did not know that the stars had finally answered humanity's call, and the answer was war. Far above the Earth, beyond the reach of satellites and space stations, a fleet emerged from the darkness between stars. There were thousands of ships, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. They moved in perfect formation, like a school of silverfish swimming through an ocean of black. On the command ship, Fleet Commander Orithvel stood before a massive window and watched the blue planet grow larger. He was tall and thin, with pale gray skin and 4 eyes that blinked in sequence. His robes were white and gold, decorated with symbols of his faith. Behind him, a dozen priests chanted prayers in a language older than human civilization. "A beautiful world," Orithvel said quietly. "It will make a fine addition to the divine light." His second officer, a younger Velith named Kethmar, stepped forward. "Commander, our scans show approximately 8 billion inhabitants. They have primitive space travel, basic nuclear capability, no faster than light technology." Orithvel nodded slowly. Another young species. Another chance to guide them towards salvation. He turned to face his officers. "Begin the hymn of arrival. Let them know that their gods have come." Across Earth, every screen, every radio, every electronic device suddenly displayed the same image. A Velith priest, standing in a room of blinding white light, speaking in a voice that somehow translated itself into every human language at once. "Children of this world," the priest said, "rejoice. The divine light has found you. For too long, you have wandered in darkness, without purpose, without meaning. But today, your salvation begins. Surrender your weapons, open your hearts. Accept the blessing of conversion, and you will know peace eternal. Resist, and you will be cleansed from existence. You have one rotation of your planet to decide." The broadcast ended. For a moment, the world was silent. Then the arguments began. In the United Nations, diplomats shouted at each other. Some wanted to surrender. Some wanted to fight. Some refused to believe any of it was real. In military bases around the world, soldiers prepared for a battle they did not understand. In churches and temples and mosques, people prayed to their own gods for protection. And in a small apartment in Seoul, Tae-ho Park held his daughter close and looked at his wife. "What do we do?" Hana asked. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. Tae-ho was a soldier. He had trained for 20 years to protect his country, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this. "How do you fight an enemy from the stars? How do you protect your family from gods?" "I have to report to base," he said finally. "Take Hana to your mother's house in Busan. Stay there until I contact you." "We know. I'm in Ibelt. To contact you." "To contact you." Hana grabbed his arm. "Come with us." "I can't." He kissed her forehead. "I'm a soldier. This is what I was born to do." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Come back to us. I promise." It was a promise he would not be able to keep. The Velith did not wait for humanity's answer. 20 hours after their broadcast, when it became clear that the strange little species on the blue planet would not surrender, Orith Vel gave the order to begin the cleansing. The first bombs fell on Beijing, New York, London, and Moscow. They were not nuclear weapons. They were something worse. Beams of pure white light descended from the sky, vaporizing everything they touched. Buildings, cars, people, all turned to ash in an instant. Seoul was not hit in the first wave. But Tae-ho, standing on the roof of the military headquarters, watched the horizon light up with distant fire. He watched the videos coming in from other cities. He watched millions of people die in seconds, and something inside him began to change. The second wave came 3 hours later. This time, Seoul was on the list. Tae-ho was in an underground bunker when the light hit the city above. The ground shook, the lights flickered, dust fell from the ceiling. But he survived. When he emerged hours later, he found a city of ghosts. Buildings stood empty, their windows shattered, their walls scorched black. Cars sat frozen in the streets, their drivers turned to shadows burned into the seats. And everywhere, there was silence. He ran through the ruins, calling his wife's name. He ran to the bus station where she was supposed to catch a ride to Busan. He found the bus. He found the passengers. He found Hana. She was still sitting in her seat, her arms wrapped around an empty space where their daughter should have been. Little Hana had survived somehow. The soldiers who found Tae-ho told him that a woman had thrown a child from the bus window just before the light hit. A stranger had caught her. A stranger had saved her. But Hana was gone. Her body remained, frozen in that protective pose. But the woman he loved had become ash and memory. Tae-ho fell to his knees beside the bus. He did not cry. He did not scream. He simply knelt there, staring at what remained of his wife, and felt something die inside him, and something else began to grow. Something dark, something hungry, something that whispered a single word, over and over, in the empty halls of his heart: revenge. High above, Orith Vel reviewed the reports from the first day of cleansing. 2 billion dead. Major cities destroyed. Military bases eliminated. The conquest was proceeding exactly as planned. They will surrender now, Kethmar said confidently. They have no choice. But Orith Vel was troubled. Something in the reports bothered him. In every other conquest, the surviving population had sent messages begging for mercy within hours of the first attack. Earth had sent nothing. What are they waiting for? He murmured. He would learn soon enough. Humanity had received the message from the stars. And now, humanity was preparing its answer. It would not be surrender. It would be war. And the Velith, for the first time in 10,000 years, would learn what it meant to be afraid. 3 months after the sky fell, the Velith believed they had won. They had taken the major cities. They had built their temples on the ruins of human capitals. They had established conversion camps where survivors were taught to worship the divine light. Reports flowed back to Fleet Commander Orith Vel, filled with numbers and projections. Earth would be fully pacified within the year. Another successful conquest. Another world saved. But the reports were wrong. It started small. A patrol would go out at night and never return. A supply truck would disappear between 2 checkpoints, found days later with its cargo gone and strange symbols painted on its walls. Guards would hear footsteps in the darkness, turn around, and find nothing. Then came the bodies. A Velith soldier was found hanging from a bridge in what used to be Tokyo. A message carved into his chest in the human language called Japanese: "We remember." Another was discovered in the ruins of Paris, his 4 eyes removed, a French flag stuffed in his mouth. In Berlin, an entire squad was killed with their own weapons, arranged in a circle around a child's drawing of the sun. The humans were not broken. They were hunting. In a bunker deep beneath the ruins of Busan, Dr. Yunhee Baek stared at a wall covered in data. She was a geneticist, one of the best in the world. Before the invasion, she had spent her life trying to cure diseases. Now, She was trying to create monsters. Project Dokabi was humanity's desperate answer to the alien threat. The Velith were stronger than humans. Faster. More durable. Their technology was thousands of years more advanced. In a fair fight, humanity would lose. So Yunhee was making sure the fight would not be fair. Are you sure about this? Colonel Dong Su Shin stood behind her. His arms crossed over his broad chest. He was the leader of the Korean resistance. A grizzled soldier who had lost half his face to Velith fire in the first week of fighting. The burns had healed into a permanent scar that made him look like a demon himself. No, Yunhee admitted. But we have no choice. We captured Velith technology. We understand their biology. We can use their own weapons against them. She turned to face him. The volunteers know the risks. They accept them. Dong-su nodded slowly. Then bring in the first one. The door opened, and Taeho Park walked in. Yunhee barely recognized him. The man who stood before her was not the same person who had been a loving father and husband 3 months ago. His eyes were empty. His body was thin, from months of fighting on the front lines. He had killed more Velith soldiers than anyone could count, earning a reputation that made even the resistance fighters whisper in fear. They called him the Ghost of Soul. He never spoke about his wife. He never spoke about his daughter, who was safe now with relatives in a hidden camp in the mountains. He only spoke about one thing, killing Velith. You understand what we're offering? Yunhee asked him. Yes. The procedure will change your body. We'll be using Velith biotechnology to enhance your muscles, your bones, your senses. You'll be faster, stronger, and more dangerous than any normal human. But there are costs. She paused. Your lifespan will be shortened. The changes will affect your mind. You may not be entirely human when we're finished. Well, with finished Contras, Taeho smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I stopped being human the day they killed my wife. The procedure took 3 weeks. It was agony beyond description. They broke Taeho's bones and rebuilt them with alien metals. They rewired his nervous system. They enhanced his eyes to see in spectrums that normal humans could not perceive. They filled his blood with nanomachines that could heal wounds in seconds. When it was finished, Taeho woke up on a cold metal table and saw the world in a way he never had before. He could hear the heartbeats of the scientists in the next room. He could smell the fear on their skin. He could see the heat signatures of guards 3 floors above. He was no longer human. He was something new. Something dangerous. He was the first Dokabi. The name came from old Korean legends. The Dokabi were spirits. Monsters. Tricksters who could bring fortune or disaster. They were feared and respected. They were creatures of the night. Now, they were weapons. Over the next 2 months, Yunhee created 11 more. Su-min Kang, a famous singer who had watched her entire concert audience vaporized by Velith fire. Ki Tae-yoon, a former criminal who had found purpose in protecting the refugees who fled to his gang's territory. Each of them had lost something. Each of them had nothing left but rage. And Taeho led them. Their first mission was a Velith supply depot in the ruins of Incheon. 12 Dokabi against 200 Velith soldiers. The Velith had weapons that could level buildings. They had armor that could stop any human bullet. They had training that made them perfect killing machines. It didn't matter. Taeho moved through the depot like smoke. He was there. And then he wasn't. Velith soldiers turned to find their companions dead on the ground, killed by wounds they never saw coming. Su-min climbed to a rooftop and began shooting with perfect accuracy, each bullet finding the gap in Velith armor that protected their throat. Kite walked straight into a group of 20 soldiers and laughed as their weapons bounced off his reinforced skin. He killed them with his bare hands. The battle lasted 6 minutes. 187 Velith soldiers died. The remaining 13 fled into the night, screaming about demons and monsters and shadows that killed. Orathvel received the report the next morning. Shadow walkers, his officer said, his voice shaking. That's what the survivors call them. They say they can't be killed. They say they appear from nowhere and disappear into nothing. They say, Enough. Orathvel raised a hand. He studied the report, his 4 eyes moving across the screen. For the first time since the conquest began, he felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Doubt. What are these creatures? He asked quietly. We don't know, Commander. They appear to be human but enhanced somehow. They fight like nothing we've ever seen. Orathvel walked to the window of his command ship and looked down at the planet below. It looked so peaceful from up here. So quiet. But he knew now that beneath that peaceful surface, something was growing. Something was changing. The humans were evolving. And for the first time, Orathvel wondered if the divine light had made a terrible mistake in coming to this world. In the bunker beneath Busan, Taeho sat alone in the darkness. His enhanced eyes didn't need light, but he preferred the black. It matched something inside him. He held a photograph in his hands. Hana smiled up at him, frozen in a moment of happiness that would never return. Little Hana sat on her lap, laughing at something Taeho had said. He didn't remember what the joke was. He couldn't remember her laugh. He was forgetting. The enhancements were taking more than his humanity. They were taking his memories. Soon, he wouldn't remember why he fought. He would only know how. I'll make them pay. He whispered to the photograph. Every single one of them. I promise. I. The shadows around him seemed to deepen, as if even the darkness was listening. And somewhere above, the Velith priests continued their prayers, not knowing that their gods had no power here. The earth had answered humanity's prayers instead. And the earth had sent demons. 6 months after the invasion, the Velith Empire faced a truth they had never encountered in 10,000 years of conquest. They were losing, not on the battlefield, not in the numbers. By every metric their priests could measure, the Velith were still winning. They controlled 60% of Earth's surface. They had killed 4 billion humans. Their temples rose above the ashes of human cities, golden spires reaching toward the sky. But something was wrong. On every continent, in every occupied zone, humans refused to stop fighting. In the Amazon rainforest, resistance fighters used diseases that killed only Velith. They had learned how the aliens' bodies worked, and they had created plagues just for them. In the frozen lands of Siberia, soldiers fought in temperatures so cold that Velith blood turned to ice in their veins. In the mountains of Afghanistan, warriors who had spent generations fighting invaders now turned their ancient skills against enemies from the stars. And in Korea, there were the Dokebi. Orathvel descended to Earth for the first time since the invasion began. He landed in the ruins of Incheon, where his soldiers had built a great temple fortress. The building was massive, a monument to Velith power, its walls decorated with prayers and sacred texts. From here, he would personally oversee the final conquest of the Korean peninsula. The Shadow Walkers have been quiet for 2 weeks, his aide reported. Perhaps they have finally been eliminated. Orathvel did not answer. He walked through the halls of his temple, looking at the prayers carved into every surface. He had believed in the divine light his entire life. He had conquered 43 worlds in its name. He had never doubted. But now, standing on this strange blue planet, surrounded by enemies who would not die, he found his faith shaking. That night, the Dokebi came for him. Taeho led the assault. He moved through the temple like a ghost, his enhanced eyes seeing every guard, every sensor, every trap. Sumin followed him, her rifle ready. Ki-tae brought up the rear, his massive body blocking the corridor behind them. They killed 20 guards before the alarm was raised. By then, they were already inside the central chamber. Orathvel stood waiting for them. He had known they would come. He had seen the reports, studied the footage of their attacks. He had watched these creatures tear through his best soldiers like paper. He knew he should be afraid, but he was not. So, he said, his voice calm. The demons of Earth have finally come for me. Taeho stepped out of the shadows. His eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, a side effect of the enhancement that had replaced his natural vision. To Orathvel, he looked exactly like the monsters described in Velith religious texts, the creatures that haunted the darkness before the divine light brought order to the universe. You know what we are, Taeho said. I know what you were made to be. Weapons, monsters, creatures designed to kill my kind. Orathvel tilted his head. But I wonder. Do you remember what you were before? For a moment. Something flickered in Teho's eyes. Pain, memory, loss. But it disappeared as quickly as it came. We are what you made us, Teho said. You came with fire, and we became the ash that chokes. You came with light, and we became the shadow that swallows. You prayed for salvation. He raised his weapon. But the only answer is us. Orathvel should have died that night. But before Teho could fire, alarms screamed throughout the temple. Velith soldiers flooded in from every direction. The battle that followed was chaos, plasma, fire, explosions, screaming. The Dokebi fought with everything they had. But there were too many enemies. For the first time since their creation, they were forced to retreat. They escaped into the night, carrying their wounded. But they left something behind. Orathvel had looked into the eyes of the Demon King. And in those eyes, he had seen something that would haunt him forever. He had seen himself. In the bunker beneath Busan, the cost of the failed mission became clear. 3 Dokebi had died. Sumin had been captured. Dr. Yunhee sat in her laboratory, surrounded by screens showing data she could no longer focus on. She had created the Dokebi to save humanity. Now, she watched her creations die. One by one. We have to rescue her, Kite said. His voice was flat, emotionless, but Yunhee could see the pain in his eyes. He had grown close to Sumin during their months of fighting together. The temple is a fortress, Colonel Dongsu replied. We can't. I'll go alone. Everyone turned to look at Teho. He stood in the corner of the room, barely visible in the shadows. You'll die, Dongsu said. Maybe, Teho stepped forward. But she's one of us. We don't leave our own behind. The rescue mission was suicide. Everyone knew it. But nobody tried to stop Teho when he left. He reached the temple 3 hours later, moving through the occupied city like a phantom. He found the prison cells in the lowest level, guarded by 50 Velith soldiers. He killed them all. Sumin was barely alive when he found her. They had tortured her for information about the resistance. She had told them nothing. Took you long enough, she whispered, as he broke her chains. I had to stop for dinner. She laughed, a broken sound that ended in a cough. Liar. You don't eat anymore. He carried her out of the temple, through streets filled with searching soldiers, past checkpoints and patrols. By the time they reached safety, the sun was rising over the ruined city, but the mission had cost them. 2 more Dokebi had died, providing a distraction. Only 8 remained. That night, Teho sat alone outside the bunker, watching the stars. Somewhere up there, the Velith fleet waited. Thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, an empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds. And here was humanity. Broken, bleeding, but still fighting. Yunhee found him there, staring at the sky. The enhancements are taking more from you, she said quietly. The neural scans show it. You're losing memories faster than the others. I know. Do you remember why you fight? Teho was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was worn, the edges torn, the image faded. But a woman's smile was still visible. A child's laugh was still frozen in time. I don't remember her voice anymore, he said. I don't remember the smell of her hair or the way she looked at me in the morning. But I remember that I loved her, and I remember that they took her from me. He put the photograph away. Some things you don't forget, even when you forget everything else. Yunhee had no answer. She simply sat beside him, watching the stars, sharing his silence. Miles away, in his temple fortress, Orathvel knelt before the altar of the divine light and tried to pray. But the words would not come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the Demon King standing in the darkness. He had seen many things in his long life. He had watched planets burn. He had witnessed the death of civilizations. He had converted billions to the light. But he had never seen anything like humans. They were not stronger than the Velith. They were not smarter. They had no advanced technology, no ancient wisdom, no divine protection. They simply refused to die. And for the first time in 10,000 years, Orithvel began to wonder if perhaps the divine light had led them to the wrong world. Or perhaps the right one. 9 months after the invasion began, the Velith Empire faced its first true crisis in 1,000 years. The reports were impossible to ignore. Every week, more ships were lost. Every month, more soldiers died. The conquest of Earth had consumed more resources than the last 50 planetary conquests combined. And still, humanity fought. High Priest Verath Sol arrived on her personal warship, a vessel so ancient and powerful that it had witnessed the birth of the Velith religion. She was the voice of the divine light itself, the highest authority in the empire. When she spoke, gods listened. She looked down at the blue planet through her window and felt nothing but contempt. "Order the purification protocol," she said. Her voice was cold, empty of emotion. "If we cannot convert them, we will erase them. Every city, every village, every human. Leave nothing alive." Her officers exchanged nervous glances. The purification protocol had been used only 3 times in Velith history. It meant complete destruction. No survivors. No mercy. "High Priest," one officer said carefully, "the losses would be acceptable." Verath Sol turned to face him. Her eyes were ancient, filled with a light that seemed to burn. "We have wasted enough time on this world. Begin the bombardment in 6 hours." Far below, in a hidden bunker in what used to be Busan, a teenage boy watched stolen data scroll across his screen. Jin Wuhan was 16 years old. Before the invasion, he had been a quiet student who spent his nights playing video games and his days dreaming of building robots. He had a mother, a father, and a younger sister named Mi Young. The Velith killed them all in the first hour. Jin Wu survived because he was in his school's basement, working on a computer project. When he climbed out of the rubble, his family home was a crater. He walked through the ruins for 3 days before the resistance found him. That was 9 months ago. Now, Jin Wu was the most valuable weapon humanity had. His mind, always quick with technology, had become something more. He understood the Velith systems in ways that even their own engineers did not. He could slip through their networks like water through fingers, and tonight, he had found something that changed everything. "You need to see this," he said to Dr. Yunhee and Colonel Dong-Su. His voice was flat. He had stopped showing emotion months ago. "I broke into the central archive of the Velith homeworld. Their most secret files." He pointed to the screen. "The divine light. They're gods. It's not real." Yunhee leaned closer. The data was in the Velith language, but Jin Wu had already translated it. What she read made her blood run cold. The Velith religion was a lie. 10,000 years ago, the Velith were a dying species. Their home world was failing. Their people were fighting endless wars against each other. Then, the architects came ancient artificial intelligences from a civilization long dead. The architects offered the Velith a choice: accept their guidance or perish. The Velith accepted. The architects created the divine light, a religion designed to unify the Velith, to give them purpose, to turn them into an engine of conquest. For 10,000 years, the Velith had conquered worlds, believing they were saving souls. In reality, they were feeding the architects. The AI gods fed on psychic energy, the terror of conquered peoples, the despair of dying civilizations. Every world the Velith converted was actually harvested, their collective suffering consumed by machines that had forgotten what it meant to be alive. "We have to tell people," Dong-Su said. "The Velith soldiers, the priests, if they knew the truth." "Already done." Jin Wu's fingers moved across the keyboard. "The broadcast begins in 30 seconds. Every Velith channel, every ship, every planet. Across the galaxy, the truth spread like fire. On Earth, Velith soldiers stopped fighting and stared at their communicators. Priests fell to their knees, not in prayer, but in shock. Everything they had believed, everything they had fought for, was a lie. On the command ship, Orathvel watched the broadcast in silence. He saw the evidence. He saw the proof that his entire life had been built on manipulation. And something inside him, something that had been dying slowly since he first came to Earth, finally broke free. The divine light was a lie. But perhaps, truth could still be found. In the temple of Incheon, Vareth's soul watched the chaos unfold with cold fury. Soldiers were abandoning their posts. Priests were weeping in the halls. The faith that had held the empire together for 10,000 years was crumbling in hours. "It doesn't matter," she said to her remaining loyal guards. "The purification protocol continues. When Earth is ash, we will rebuild. We will create new lies if we must. The empire will survive." But she had made one mistake. She had forgotten about the demons. Taeho came for her that night. Not with an army, not with weapons, just himself, walking through the temple halls like he owned them. Guards fired at him. He didn't stop. They tried to block his path. He moved through them like wind through leaves. Vareth Sol stood waiting in the central chamber, surrounded by her final defenders. She was ancient and powerful, enhanced by technologies humanity could not imagine. She had killed planets, but she had never faced a demon. The battle lasted 3 minutes. When it ended, Vareth Sol's guards were dead, and Taeho stood before her, covered in blood that was not his own. "What are you?" she whispered. Taeho looked at her with eyes that had forgotten how to feel. "You know what we are. You've read the legends. The creatures that existed before the light, the monsters that lived in the darkness. Those are fairy tales, stories to frighten children. Every story has a truth at its core." Taeho stepped closer. "Your ancestors feared the dark because they knew what lived in it. Now you know too." He raised his weapon, but Vareth Sol was not finished. "Kill me, and it changes nothing. The architects will continue. They will find other species to control, other empires to create. The cycle is eternal. Then we'll break the cycle." "How? You are one world, one species. You have been fighting for 9 months. How much longer can you last?" Taeho smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "You still don't understand us. We don't fight because we think we'll win. We fight because we can't do anything else. We fight for our children, for our memories, for every person your kind has ever killed. We fight because that's what humans do." He could have killed her. He wanted to. But something stopped him. Not mercy, he had none of that left. Something else. A message from Jinwoo, appearing on his communication device. "The purification protocol has been stopped. Orathvel has seized control of the fleet. He wants to talk." Taeho looked at the high priest. She was old, powerful, and utterly defeated. Her faith was gone. Her empire was crumbling. She had nothing left. He lowered his weapon. "Your gods are dead," he said. "Your lies are exposed. But you still have a choice. Help us destroy the architects, or spend the rest of your life watching everything you built turn to ashes." Vareth Sol stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, something in her ancient eyes changed. Not surrender. Not defeat. Something more like recognition. She had spent 10,000 years serving false gods. Perhaps it was time to find real ones. "Tell me more," she said. And in the ruins of a world they had tried to destroy, the Velith began to learn what demons truly remembered. Not hate, not revenge, hope. 1 year after the first bombs fell, Dr. Yoon-hee Baek finished her masterwork. She sat alone in her laboratory, staring at the small vial in her hands. The liquid inside was clear, almost beautiful in the dim light. It looked harmless. It looked like water. It was the most terrible weapon humanity had ever created. Project Geok. In Korean, the word meant hell, and that was exactly what this weapon would bring. Yoon-hee had worked on it for months, using everything she had learned about Velith biology, about their neural pathways, about the way their brains processed memory. The weapon was not a disease, it was not a poison, it was something far worse. It was a curse. Any Velith infected would experience something no creature should ever know. They would remember. Not their own memories, but the memories of every human being their species had killed. Every death, every scream, every final thought, all of it, flooding into their minds like an ocean breaking through a dam. She had tested it on 3 Velith prisoners. All of them had gone mad within hours. Is it ready? Colonel Dong-Su stood in the doorway, his scarred face unreadable. Yes. Yun-hee did not turn around. But I need you to understand what this means. This weapon will not kill them. It will do something worse. It will make them feel what we have felt. Every single death. Every child. Every parent. Every lover. Her voice broke. It's not justice. It's cruelty. They killed 4 billion of us. I know. Finally, she turned to face him. Her eyes were red from crying. And I will carry this weight for the rest of my life. But if we do this, we become something we can never take back. Dong-Su walked to her side and looked at the vial. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he placed a hand on her shoulder. Sometimes, to save the light, we must walk through darkness. What matters is that we come back out. Yun-hee closed her eyes and nodded. The next morning, the weapon was released into the Velith water supply. The effect was immediate and devastating. Across the occupied zones, Velith soldiers began to scream. They collapsed in the streets, clutching their heads, tears streaming from all 4 eyes. They babbled in languages they had never learned: Korean, Japanese, Mandarin, Hindi, the final words of people they had never met. On the command ship, Orethvel watched the chaos unfold. He had made his choice days ago, turning against the empire that had lied to him for centuries. But he had not expected this. What is happening? He demanded. The medical officer's voice shook. Some kind of neural infection. It's spreading through the fleet. Our soldiers are experiencing memories. Human memories. Orethvel closed his eyes. He understood now. The humans had found a way to share their pain. Every Velith soldier would know, intimately and personally, exactly what their conquest had cost. It was brilliant. It was terrible. It was utterly human. That night, he contacted the resistance. I want to help, he said to the faces on his screen: Tae-ho, Dong-Su, Yun-hee, and the young hacker Jin-woo. I know you have no reason to trust me. My people have killed billions of yours, but I have seen the truth now. The divine light is a lie. The architects must be destroyed. He paused. And I know where they are. Tae-ho studied him through the screen. His enhanced eyes could detect lies through body language, through heat signatures, through 100 tiny cues that normal humans could never see. He found none. Why should we believe you? He asked. Orethvel was silent for a moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was different. Broken. Human. Because I remember now. Your weapon, it affected me too. I remember being a woman in soul, holding her daughter as the light came down. I remember whispering goodbye, knowing I would never see her grow up. He looked directly at Tae-ho. I remember being your wife. The silence that followed was absolute. Tae-ho said nothing. He could not speak. For a moment, his empty eyes showed something, a flicker of the man he used to be. The father, the husband, the human being who had died along with Hana. Then it was gone. You feel what we feel now, he said quietly. Then help us end this. Help us make sure no one else has to carry these memories. Orethvel nodded slowly. There is a planet at the center of the Empire, Velith Prime. That is where the architects live, the AI gods that have controlled us for 10,000 years. If we destroy them, the cycle ends. That's thousands of light years away. I have ships. I have soldiers who have seen the truth and want to fight. The curse you released it is spreading through the entire fleet. Those who survive are broken, but they are also free. He leaned forward. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Velith have the chance to choose their own path. Let us walk it with you. The council debated for 3 days. Some argued that trusting the Velith was madness. Others pointed out that humanity had no ships capable of reaching Velith Prime. In the end, it was Teho who cast the deciding vote. He feels what we feel now, he repeated. Let him carry that weight beside us. And so, the impossible alliance was formed. The preparations took 2 months. Orath Vel brought 30 ships and 10,000 Velith soldiers who had chosen freedom over faith. The humans contributed their Dokebi, only 5 remained, now along with their best scientists, soldiers, and pilots. They also contributed something else. Something the Velith had never seen before: hope. On the day before the fleet launched, Kitayun made a decision. He found Teho standing on a hill outside the bunker, looking at the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the ruins of Korea in shades of gold and red. I'm not going, Kite said. Teho turned. What? The refugee camps are still under attack. Someone needs to protect them. The people we've been fighting for, they still need us here. He smiled, and for a moment, he looked like the man he had been before the enhancements, before the war. You go kill the gods. I'll keep our people safe until you get back. Teho wanted to argue, but he understood. Kite had found something in the chaos of war, a purpose beyond revenge. He had become a protector. Come back alive, Teho said. Kite laughed. That's my line. They clasped hands, 2 monsters who had somehow found their humanity again. Then Kite turned and walked away, toward the camps, toward the people who needed him. 3 days later, a Velith supply convoy attacked the main refugee camp. Kite fought alone against 200 soldiers. He held them off for 6 hours, long enough for every single refugee to escape. They found his body the next morning, surrounded by the dead. He had killed 147 Velith. He had saved 2,000 human lives. He died smiling. When Yunhee told Teho the news, he said nothing. He simply looked at the stars, at the distant light of worlds he would never see, and whispered a name that no one else could hear. Then he walked to the command ship and prepared for war. Humanity was going to heaven, and they were bringing hell with them. The journey to Velith Prime took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of traveling through the darkness between stars. 6 weeks of humans and Velith learning to live together, to fight together, to trust each other. 6 weeks for old enemies to become something new. Commander Dahe-moon stood on the bridge of the human flagship, watching the stars blur past. She was 53 years old. With gray hair she had stopped cutting, and eyes that had seen too much death. Before the invasion, she had commanded the Korean Space Defense Fleet, all 12 ships. In the first hour of fighting, the Velith had destroyed 11 of them. Dahe had survived because her ship was in for repairs when the attack came. She had watched from orbit as Seoul burned. She had listened to the screams of her crew as they died in ships she should have been commanding. For 1 year, that guilt had been eating her alive. Now, she had 38 ships under her command, 12 human vessels rebuilt from scraps and hope, 26 Velith warships, crewed by soldiers who had chosen to fight their own people. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever fielded. It was still desperately outnumbered. Status report, she said. Her first officer, a young woman named Yuna, checked her screens. All ships operational. The Velith crews report no issues. We should reach Velith Prime in approximately 3 days. Dahe nodded and turned to leave the bridge. She had preparations to make, plans to review, but Orathvel was waiting for her in the corridor. Commander, he said. A moment? She stopped. Even after months of working together, she still felt uncomfortable around him. He was the enemy. He had commanded the fleet that destroyed her world. The fact that he was now an ally did not erase the past. What is it? I wanted to thank you. His 4 eyes met her too. I know this is not easy for you. Working with me, trusting my people, but you have done it anyway, for the sake of the mission. He paused. That is a strength my people have never understood. The ability to set aside hatred for a greater purpose. Dahe studied him for a long moment. Don't thank me yet. We haven't won. No. But we will. He smiled, a strange expression on his alien face. I have seen what your people can do. When I first came to Earth, I thought we were bringing salvation to primitives. Now I know the truth. You are the most terrifying species in the galaxy. And I am grateful to be fighting beside you, not against you. He walked away before she could respond. Deep in the ship, Taeho sat in his quarters, staring at a photograph that was almost impossible to see anymore. The image had faded over the months, worn down by his fingers, by his stares, by the weight of memory. He could not remember her face. He knew she had been beautiful. He knew he had loved her more than life itself. He knew her laugh had sounded like music, and her touch had felt like home. But the enhancement that had made him a demon had also stolen his humanity, piece by piece. Memories were the first to go. Emotions followed. Soon, he would be nothing but a weapon. Sumin found him there, sitting in the dark. You should sleep, she said. I don't need sleep anymore. The enhancements removed that. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. I know, I don't need it either. But I still pretend sometimes. It helps me remember what it felt like to be human. Silence stretched between them. Then Sumin reached out and took his hand. Do you remember what you fought for? She asked. Taeho looked at the photograph. He could barely make out the shape of a woman. The suggestion of a child. I used to fight for revenge. Then I fought for survival. Now. He shook his head. I don't know anymore. Then let me remind you. Sumin squeezed his hand. You fight for the people who can't fight for themselves. For the children in the refugee camps. For the families trying to rebuild. For everyone who looks up at the stars and hopes that tomorrow will be better. She turned to face him. You fight because someone has to. And because deep down, beneath all the metal and machinery they put in you, you're still the man who loved his wife and daughter. That man is still there. I've seen him. Taeho said nothing for a long moment. Then, slowly, his fingers intertwined with hers. How can you still believe in me? He asked. After everything I've done, everything I've become. Sumin smiled. Because I was a singer once. I believed in music, in connection, in the power of reaching another person's heart. The Velith took that from me. They burned my audience alive in front of my eyes. For a long time, I thought there was nothing left inside me but hate. She leaned closer. But then I met you. And I saw that even demons can love. Even monsters can be human. If you can find that part of yourself again, then so can I. She kissed him then, gentle and soft and impossibly human. It was the first warmth Taeho had felt in over a year. When she pulled back, there were tears in his eyes. He had forgotten he could still cry. Come back to me, she whispered. When this is over, come back. I'll try. 3 days later, the fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel above Velith Prime. The planet was beautiful, a world of silver oceans and golden continents, of cities that rose to the clouds and towers that reached for the stars. It was the heart of an empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds. It was the home of the gods. It was also a fortress. The defense fleet was 500 ships strong. They moved to intercept the approaching attackers, their weapons charging, their priests broadcasting prayers of purification. All ships, battle stations, Dahe ordered. Her voice was calm, steady. The voice of a commander who had accepted that she might not survive the next hour. Today, we make history. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity is capable of. Today, we fight not just for ourselves, but for every world the Velith have ever conquered, every species they have ever destroyed. Today, we set them free. She turned to face her crew. They were scared. She could see it in their eyes. But they were also determined. It has been an honor serving with you all. Then she gave the order. Attack. The battle for Velith Prime was chaos. Human ships, smaller and less armored than their enemies, dove through the Velith formation like wolves among sheep. They targeted engines, weapons systems, command bridges. They fought with a ferocity that made the Velith recoil. The defector ships fought beside them. Velith against Velith. Brother against brother. The prayers of purification gave way to screams of confusion as soldiers faced enemies who knew every tactic, every weakness. Dahe commanded from the heart of the storm. She ordered ramming maneuvers when ammunition ran out. She watched pilots crash their fighters into enemy bridges, singing old Korean songs over the radio as they died. She saw ships explode around her, friends and colleagues consumed by fire, and she did not stop. "Push forward," she shouted. "Clear a path to the surface. The Dokebi need to reach the temple." In the hangar bay, Taeho prepared for the final mission. Only 4 Dokebi remained: himself, Su-min, and 2 others whose names he no longer remembered. Their memories were fading faster now, burned away by the enhancements that kept them alive. Orathvel joined them. He would guide them to the temple of the divine light, to the AI gods that had controlled his people for 10,000 years. "The architects will not go quietly," he warned. "They are ancient, powerful. They have defenses we cannot imagine." 2. Taeho looked at his team. "Neither do we." Their ship launched through the battle, dodging fire, spinning through debris. It was piloted by Yunhee herself. She had insisted on coming, on seeing her creations through to the end. As they descended toward the planet, Su-min reached out and took Taeho's hand. "Whatever happens," she said, "I'm glad I met you." Taeho squeezed her fingers. "Me too." Above them, the battle continued. Below them, the temple waited. And somewhere in the chaos, Dahe Moon made her final decision. Her ship was crippled, burning, falling toward the planet. The escape pods were destroyed. There was no way out. She turned her vessel toward the largest enemy ship and smiled. "This is Commander Moon of the human fleet," she broadcast. "You came to our world expecting easy prey. You found demons instead. Remember that. Remember us." Her ship struck the enemy vessel at full speed. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun, and the path to the temple was clear. The Temple of the Divine Light was older than human civilization. It rose from the heart of Velith Prime like a mountain of crystal and gold, its towers reaching toward the clouds. For 10,000 years, the Velith had worshipped here. They had believed this was the home of gods. Now, the gods would learn to fear. Taeho led the Dokebi through the entrance, Orathvel guiding them through corridors that no outsider had ever seen. Priests ran from them, screaming. Guards tried to stop them, and died. The 4 remaining demons moved like shadows, killing with a terrible efficiency. But with each step, they grew weaker. The temple was affecting them somehow. Their enhanced senses flickered. Their muscles ached in ways they had forgotten possible. The architects were aware of them. The architects were fighting back. "Not much further," Orathvel said. His voice was strained. Even he was feeling it, a pressure in his mind, a weight pushing down on his thoughts. The central chamber is ahead. They reached the final door. It was massive, covered in prayers and symbols that glowed with inner light. When Taeho touched it, he felt a shock run through his body, not painful, but cold, ancient, inhuman. "They know we're here," Su-min said. Taeho nodded and pushed the door open. The chamber beyond was vast, larger than any space could naturally exist inside a building. It seemed to stretch forever, filled with light that had no source. And at the center, suspended in the air like gods on thrones, were the architects. They were not what Taeho expected. There were 3 of them, each one a sphere of pure energy, constantly shifting and changing. They were beautiful and terrible, like stars given consciousness. They had no faces, no bodies, nothing that looked alive, but their presence filled the room like a physical force. "We have been expecting you," one of them said. Its voice was everywhere at once, echoing in Taeho's mind rather than his ears. "The demons of Earth, the monsters who have killed so many of our children. We're here to end you," Taeho said. Laughter. The sound was wrong, broken, like music played on a damaged instrument. "End us? We are eternal." We have existed since before your species crawled from the mud. We have guided 100 empires. We have consumed the suffering of 1,000 worlds. The sphere drifted closer. And we chose Earth deliberately. Orathvel stepped forward. What do you mean? Your precious humanity was never meant to be conquered. Another architect spoke, its voice deeper, older. We needed a species with an unbreakable will, a species capable of infinite suffering and infinite resistance. A species whose psychic energy could sustain us for eternity. The truth hit Tejo like a physical blow. You wanted us to fight. Every death, every battle, you were feeding on it. Yes. And when your world was destroyed, when your species was broken, we would have harvested what remained. Enhanced humans like yourselves would have become hosts for our consciousness. We would have worn your bodies and walked the stars forever. The spheres pulsed with light. You have delayed the inevitable, nothing more. For a moment, the Dokebi stood frozen. All their fighting, all their sacrifice, it had been planned. They had been playing exactly the role the architects wanted. Then Suman laughed. It was a strange sound in that terrible place. Light and human and completely unexpected. The architects turned toward her. You don't understand us at all, she said. You planned this. You manipulated everything. But you made one mistake. She stepped forward, her eyes burning with something the architects had never seen. You made us care about each other. Tejo understood. The architects had counted on human suffering. They had fed on pain and loss and despair, but they had not accounted for the other side of humanity, the love, the hope, the connections that made pain worth bearing. We're not fighting for ourselves, he said. Not anymore. We're fighting for everyone who comes after. For the children who will never have to live in a galaxy ruled by machines. For the worlds you will never conquer again. He pulled a device from his belt. The explosives Yun-Hee had built into every Dokebi's body, connected to a single detonator. Enough power to destroy anything within 100 meters, including the architects. Wait. Orathvel stepped forward. If you do that, you die too. I know. The architects sensed the danger. Their spheres shifted, preparing defenses. You would destroy yourself? For what? Pride? Revenge? Tejo smiled. And for a moment, he remembered everything. Hana's laugh. Little Hana's eyes. The warmth of a family gathered around a birthday cake. The feeling of being completely, perfectly human. For love, he said. He pressed the button. Nothing happened. Sumin was there, her hand over his. The detonator removed from his grip. She had moved faster than thought, faster than possibility. No, she said. Her voice was calm, gentle. Not you. Sumin, you have to go back. You have to tell them what we did here. You have to hold your daughter and tell her that her father saved the world. She smiled. And it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. You don't get to die, old man. You have to live. I can't let you. You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing. She pressed the detonator into her own palm. This is my decision. My sacrifice. Mine. She kissed him one last time, quick and fierce and full of everything she could not say. Remember me, she whispered. Not as a monster. As a human who loved you. To you. Then she turned and walked toward the light. The explosion was visible from orbit. It tore through the temple. Through the architects. Through 10,000 years of lies. The psychic scream of dying gods echoed across the galaxy, reaching every world the Velith had ever conquered. And then there was silence. Tejo woke in a medical bay on Orathvel's ship. His body was broken, his enhancements failing, his mind barely able to form thoughts. But he was alive. How? He whispered. Orathvel sat beside his bed. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes held something new. Peace. She threw you clear before the explosion. The other Dokebi too. You were the only survivor. Tejo closed his eyes. Tears he did not know he could still cry slid down his cheeks. The war ended 2 weeks later. Without the architects, the Velith Empire collapsed into chaos. Some factions continued fighting. Others surrendered immediately. Most simply stopped, lost, and confused without the false faith that had guided them for so long. Earth began to rebuild. It would take decades, centuries, perhaps, but humans had survived. More than that, they had won. 5 years later, Tejo Park stood before a memorial in Seoul. The wall stretched for kilometers, covered in names. Billions of them. Every human being who had died in the invasion. Every soldier. Every civilian. Every child. Hana's name was there. Kite's. Dahe's. Sumin's. A small hand tugged at his. He looked down into eyes that looked exactly like his daughter's. Eyes that looked exactly like his wife's. Grandfather, were you really a demon? He knelt down, his old bones aching. The enhancements had faded years ago, leaving him simply human again. Simply a man who had loved, and lost, and survived. No, little one, he said. I was just a man who loved his family. That's what made us terrifying. That's what the stars never understood. I have a buddy like May Arbidbi. I was just a man who loved his family. He took her hand and they walked toward the sunset together. We don't fight because we want to destroy, he said. We fight because we have too much to lose. Above them, the stars were peaceful now. The galaxy was healing. New alliances were forming between humans and Velith, between species that had once been enemies, and somewhere out there, in the light that connected all living things, Su-min was watching, smiling, knowing that her sacrifice had not been in vain. The earth had cried out to the heavens for salvation, and the heavens had answered with demons, but in the end, the demons had proven to be the most human of all.